Okay, it's 9 o'clock. All of you people on the call get gold stars for being on time. I really appreciate that. However, we will make 2 more minutes for other people to try and join. There are certainly more that signed up and registered for this class than are currently on it. Okay, let's do this thing. Good morning, everybody. We are so glad that you decided to join us and find out a little bit about the VITA program and to get some basic training. As it shows on the screen, we're going to teach from a presentation. However, we expect you to try and actually do stuff on the internet, creating login accounts, establishing passwords, that type of stuff. So if you happen to have the ability to do 2 devices, it's going to be helpful for you. Okay. We are the Free Tax Prep Organization, often called VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. And this is new volunteer training. I want to emphasize the word new. If you're an experienced preparer who's already a VITA preparer, you probably don't need this. This is very basic about how you establish passwords, logins, and take the very basic test. The VITA program is associated with, sponsored in our region by United Way of Greater Cincinnati. We have about 30 different locations, 30 different sites across the tri-state that perform this free tax service as part of United Way. And with that, I will ask Matt Long, who represents United Way or is an employee of United Way, to do a brief introduction from their point of view.
Thank you for the intro, Jim. And again, just echoing Jim's sentiment, first of all, thank you to all the new volunteers who've joined in this training session today. I've been with United. I'm a senior program manager with United Way of Greater Cincinnati. I've been with the organization 2 years, coming on to 2 years, I should say, and have been leading the free tax prep initiative funded by the IRS under the banner of VITA Volunteer Income Tax Assistance during that time. And this is truly a very unique volunteer opportunity and very unique experience. I've been very passionate about this program since coming on board because first of all, it's one of the most, what makes this volunteer experience so unique is the amount of assistance and direct assistance that you can actually provide to individuals. This past summer, United Way, along with many of the volunteers who are on this call, did a lot of work around child tax credit. And for those of you who don't know, there is some exceptional rules to this, the previous year's child tax credit, and it really resulted in all sorts of dollars for families who were truly in need, as it related to COVID-19, as it related to kind of, I don't want to say recession, but obviously with the economic downturn this past year. And through VITA and free tax prep, you really get to see true impacts on individuals, and you really get to see how much this service provides to families. And I mean tangible, in that these refunds and the sort of credits families get are the things that can keep lights on in a house, that can keep food in a refrigerator, that can put clothes on children's back when they're getting ready to go to school. So this service is truly imperative. And so again, I'm just really thanking everyone about joining us for this very unique opportunity. And then also thanking, you're getting an opportunity to meet some of the most dedicated of our volunteers, those who participate in our training team. Jim, Charles, Kathy, Adrian, and Keith are all on this call today. Who are going to be guiding you, but they're part and parcel of a much larger perspective of volunteers. So again, I just really want to thank you all, and just do a quick reminder that we will be doing a recording today. That's why I've got my fancy jacket on and everything like that. And so this recording will go up on the website, and we look forward to working with you all in the tax season. But most importantly, we look forward to seeing you at the next training session, which will be next Saturday. And if you can't make next Saturdays, then obviously there'll be a few in January, and that one will also be posted on the website. So again, thank you all for joining us today. If there are any questions, Jim and team will give you all the information you need to follow up with us, and there will be a follow-up survey that will likely go out on Monday after the weekend. Jim, thank you.
I don't know if I need to do any further introductions or not. That was pretty good. So, okay. Let's see. First of all, let me do some more formal introductions. My name is Jim Uhas. I am a site coordinator. I run one of the 30 free tax prep sites. Mine happens to be in Loveland. Assisting us is Kathy Leveri. She also assists me at my Loveland location. Charles Lewis, another site coordinator, is on the call. Charles works downtown at Ohio Means Jobs, if I got that correct. And Adrienne Brandecourt is also on the call, and I know she works at a couple of sites, including Madisonville, which she actually allowed me to come and assist her one day last season. That was great. So among us, we probably have got 50, 60, 70 years of experience in doing this. This starts my 15th year in VITA, and my 13th year as a site coordinator. So I've got a little bit of time under my belt. So I just want to point that out, not to brag at all, but just to say, hey, you've got a very experienced team here to assist you in getting through this training, but more importantly, we're always here all season long to help with any questions or concerns you may have. Okay. Copies of the slides and the recording, as Matt mentioned, will be posted probably within the next week. about halfway through. We will take a 10-minute break so you can refresh your coffee and do whatever else you might need to be doing. And again, just thank you for coming. We can always use more volunteers. We get people that move, we get people who say, you know, I tried it for a year or two, it's just not for me, and leave the program. So we're always looking for more volunteers, and we continue to try and expand. You know, my particular site in Loveland, we're trying to expand to more hours per week this year than prior years, and that's just going to take more capacity. So yeah, we're always looking for more volunteers. Again, this training is for new volunteers. Some of you are just planning to be a greeter or a screener. That's great. Those roles are so critical to us in running an efficient operation. Other people are here as the beginning of what do I need to do to actually be a tax preparer. And we'll get into some of that in the second half of the presentation. Today's focus is on technology. We have found in past years that people would go to an overview class, say, that sounds pretty good. And then we give them a couple of screenshots and say, why don't you try and log into all of these different websites and softwares? And they would just get overwhelmed by the technology. So we put this training together to basically walk you through that process. So point 2 on the slide, you will actually set up a Link Learn account, which is an IRS supported program. We will actually walk you through a certification test, the Volunteer Standard of Conduct. Then after the break, we'll get into the actual tax software called TaxSlayer, and you have to create an account there as well. So again, user IDs and passwords and that type of stuff. And then finally, we'll go over a couple of basic tax scenarios just to get you wet your whistle a little bit. Okay. Please, let's see, I think that's on the next slide. Resources. There's a test booklet, the 6744, and there's a resource guide, better known as the Taxpayer's Bible. I mean, we use this all the time, called the 4012. Okay. Some of you may have physical hard copies of this that you've already been able to pick up. If you don't, you might want to try and go to irs.gov, put these numbers into the search box, and you can download a copy. Okay. We'll be referring to these publications as we go through today. Something happens, other technology questions, you lose your Zoom connection, just log back in. You know, it's Zoom etiquette. It's a Zoom call. We got many people on the call. Please set your audio to mute. However, it is a pretty small group. It's not as big as some of the groups we teach. So we encourage you to use the chat, but we may actually ask you to come off of mute and actually talk to us. But initially start by using the chat. Adrian and Kathy and Charles will respond to your questions real time. And we'll go, as we go through the presentation, we'll stop and ask for other questions. Here's one that's important. We really like to know who you are. So I noticed that some of you on your Zoom names only have a first name shown. Zona and Buck and Bob M and Alea. If you would go in, hover over your name, and there should be 3 dots that appear, and you can change your name to add your full name that you registered for the class. It just helps us monitor who's actually on the call, and we make sure we take attendance. We fully expect that all of you have signed up for this class by going to UnitedWayGreaterCincinnati.org and signed up through a volunteer tax prep website. You can go to this particular location to confirm the information that United Way has on file for you. Importantly, we want you to make sure we've got your correct email address, because most of our communication is going to be through emails. Any other questions or any other volunteer opportunities you've got, you can send a message to Shayla McGill, is a assistant that works with Matt Long, and she will help guide you to maybe a potential site. She knows all of the site coordinators or any other questions that you may have. So besides the United Way website, we also really would like you to join Mobilize. Mobilize is a web-based group sharing technology, information sharing technology. And on this Mobilize site, Matt and I and others will post questions, we'll post answers, we'll post perspective. We use it throughout the season, not just during the initial training sessions, but actually throughout the season to say, hey, I saw this come up. How do we handle this? Or I've got this one on hold because I don't know what to do with it. You post something in Mobilize, and one of the other site coordinators or team members will see it and respond and help you out. So we are all in this together. We're here to help each other and act as resources to each other. So UnitedWayGreaterCincinnati.org, free tax prep volunteer. That's one place to make sure you're signed up in. And two, go to this Mobilize group. When you actually get these slides that get sent to you next week, these are hyperlinks. You can just click on Mobilize group and it will take you to the sign-in sheet. Okay. Well, that was about 15 minutes of all of the basic introductions and logistics and getting set up. The first thing we said we would do is walk you through some of the publications and to set up an account. During December and January, this is your book. How do I pass? What do I need to do? This certification, a sister's test and retest booklet. It's called the 6744, and this is what the cover looks like. Okay. This book this year has 220 pages, but don't panic. We don't take all of the test. We only take a couple. I'm going to walk you through some specific pages to talk through some very particular aspects as it applies to you. On page I, Roman lowercase I, is the table of contents. Notice here, I've got two things highlighted: a volunteer standard of conduct test and an intake interview and quality review test. Those are two tests that almost all of us take. And by all of us, I mean all of us. I even have to take this test after 15 years. On page II are the two other highlights: the advanced course scenarios and test questions. And then those same scenarios have a retest. So the questions are asked similar questions but in a slightly different way. As part of our experience is we always encourage people to take both the test and the retest before you actually go online to Link and Learn and submit your answers. Sometimes the retest question will give you a hint, like it gives you a particular answer or a list of options. And the list of options is different than what you saw in the original question. So it's just very helpful to do both. It just also amplifies your understanding of the issue. I don't like tables and contents. I'm a flowchart guy. So on page 3 of the 6744 publication is this very convoluted flowchart. So again, follow the highlights. Everybody starts with the volunteer standard of conduct test. Once you pass that, you can then move on. You then take the intake interview and quality review test. You have to pass that second one before you can do anything else. So once that's done, what we do in our program with United Way of Greater Cincinnati, we encourage you to go directly to the advanced test. It says here, recommended for 2 or more years of experience, but it's not limited to that. And we really encourage you to try and take the advanced test and pass it. For those of you who want some additional training, there's also a basic test. But we do not encourage you at all to take any of these other tests. Site coordinator test, that's just for us leaders. Foreign student, Puerto Rico, we don't do Puerto Rican returns. Military or international, we don't do returns for military personnel or international people. So we just need to focus on volunteer standard of conduct, intake interview and quality review, and the advanced test. Okay. So these pages I'm showing are directly out of the 6744 publication. Okay, somewhat buried, but in the book, and it's on several different places, is something called information about the volunteer liability protection. As a new volunteer, we all have this initial concern. Man, what happens if I screw up? What happens if I don't do something right? What am I going to be held liable for this? The Volunteer Protection Act, I think it was passed in 1997, it's quite old, protects unpaid volunteers from liability for acts or omissions that occurred while acting within the scope of your responsibilities. But it does not protect you from harm if you are willful or criminally doing misconduct, gross negligence, reckless misconduct, conscious flagrant indifference to the rights or safeties of the individuals impacted. Bottom line is, you follow the rules of the program, you take the test, you do the certifications, you work with your site coordinator, you act in an upright and ethical way, you are totally protected from any liability for the tax returns you're helping to prepare. And as we'll go through later on, recognize that before any return actually gets filed with the IRS, not only have you prepared it, but a second, usually more experienced person has also reviewed it, called the quality reviewer. So we hope that this alleviates any incoming anxiety you may have about liability. So again, page reference is reference to the 6744. Okay. We're going to push straight ahead. So the first thing we needed to do from all of that I've already just shared with you is this volunteer standard of conduct test or exam. In the publication 6744, it's on pages 11 to 16. There is a training manual, the 4961. We're actually going to go through that training manual and kind of walk our way through it. Then once we're done with that, if you happen to have the hard copy book as we're going through this training, glance at the questions and mark your responses in your book. If you don't have your training book, then when we get to the actual test, just kind of, the training is very basic. You'll do fine. And if we need to, we'll do a brief discussion after we do the test. Okay, I'm going to switch screens. And so you should now see the 4961 publication on your screen. Oh, let's see. This is the 2022 version. Every year this gets updated. I mentioned before that the program from the IRS is called VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. But there is a sister organization called Tax Counseling for the Elderly. Just recognize that that's what TCE stands for. Oftentimes in various IRS publications, you'll see VITA/TCE. It's the same thing. It's the VITA program, just recognizing that sometimes it's also used for the TCE branch. Lovely picture of the Capitol. Okay. As a volunteer in the program, again, here you go, VITA TCE, you must adhere to the standards of conduct. Well, what are those? Here they are. Volunteer standard of conduct 1 through 6, pretty straightforward. There's a tricky part. Volunteer standard number 1 has 10 subsections. All right, so we're going to go through those. But again, basic things. Follow the site procedures, quality site requirements. Don't accept payment. Don't solicit business. Don't do anything knowingly wrong or false return. Don't personally engage in criminal or dishonest behavior. And treat all taxpayers in a professional and courteous way. Now let's amplify some of that. Quality site requirements. Number 1, volunteer standard of conduct number 1. Certification. All volunteers must pass volunteer standard of conduct certification test. Well, what's passing mean? 80% or higher. This particular test is a 10 question test. So 8 right and you pass. 9 right, you pass. 10 right, you pass. All we know as in the end is, did you pass? We just get a document that says pass or don't pass. We don't see your actual score. If you're a volunteer actually doing tax preparation, then you must certify at various levels in tax law. And again, that's either basic or advanced. And we strongly prefer people to try to certify at advanced. Okay. If you're an instructor or a coordinator, you have to pass the advanced test. Okay. Most sites also require all people to take the intake, interview, and quality review test. Some sites just do the standard of conduct test, but most sites do both tests, the intake, interview, and quality review test. It just helps the greeter or the screener better understand what's going on in the entire process. Intake interview process. Well, what is that process? This little light bulb idea says a decent description. Every taxpayer that comes, yes, every taxpayer that comes in has to complete an intake form called the 13614C. I just love these form numbers before we can prepare a return. So what happens is taxpayer comes in, they're handed this form and sometimes some other papers. They have to fill in this form and then sit down with the preparer or a screener and go through the document. There are no exceptions to this. Anybody who wants their taxes done has to do this. I don't care if you've been here for the previous 5 years. Again, you need to fill in the new form for this year, because guess what? Maybe you no longer have that same dependent this year. Maybe you're now retired. Maybe you've got a new child in your family. There's going to be things that happens in life. So we need to go through this. Okay. All right. Then the other thing is we as preparers need to complete all sections and review this with the taxpayer, and including some sections that are kind of grayed out, shaded areas that we actually fill in after we interview the taxpayer. Next item. Identity theft is an issue. And so the IRS has said, we must see photo identification for basically taxpayer and spouse, if there is a spouse, primary and secondary taxpayers. Well, what's a photo ID? It's the driver's license. You don't need to bring in a passport. You don't need to bring in a birth certificate. All I need to see is your driver's license. Okay? But I need to see it. I need to confirm names and photos. Then the more challenging one sometimes is, how do you verify Social Security numbers? And if you don't have a Social Security number, their ITIN, individual taxpayer identification number, for someone who's not qualified to get a Social Security number. We need to see the actual Social Security card or a document from Social Security, like a benefit statement, that has the complete Social Security number shown. But it cannot be a W-2. A W-2 has a taxpayer's Social Security number printed on it, but it's not from the government. It's a document sent to the government. We need to see something from the government that verifies the number. Social Security card, Social Security statement, or an ITIN letter, or the normal things that we need to see. People come in and they don't have any of that, and we don't know them. We've never done their return before. We say, you know, you got to go get this document. So we actually have to turn people away. We will direct them to socialsecurity.gov, and they can get a replacement card. They could just go home and bring it. You know, the stories we hear, all of the other coordinators will comment. Yeah, we hear all kinds of stories about missing Social Security cards. Another criteria, this is more for the sites, we need to have various publications on file in paper or electronic, and whenever we're preparing a tax return at a site. Most sites have it both ways. Most people have a paper copy of this and on the electronic forms on the computers that we use. Publication 4012, we'll talk about that one today. That's the Volunteer Resource Guide. I referred to it earlier today as the Bible. Publication 17, that is a very comprehensive document. many, many pages of very fine print and thickness. Privacy, confidentiality, and civil rights, the 4299. These three publications are absolutely required to be at every site as prescribed by the IRS. And something called a volunteer tax alert. So what's a volunteer tax alert? This is something that comes out from the IRS just before or even during tax season and say, hey, take note of this particular issue that we, the IRS, have just learned about or been alerted to, and you need to follow these changes. A couple of years ago, we started the tax year with unemployment being fully taxable. Then halfway through the season, Congress passed a law related to COVID that said only part of it would be taxable. Well, officially, we got notified through this volunteer tax alert. Unofficially, we were all notified by the news media earlier than that. But that's an example. The official publication comes from the IRS on this volunteer tax alert. Okay, you as a volunteer, whether you are a coordinator, site coordinator, a preparer, a reviewer, a greeter, a screener, a client facilitator, or even just a translator. I don't mean just even a translator, must complete the volunteer standard of conduct test every year, and you must submit a form 13615 with your signature, either actual signature or electronic, indicating that you've agreed there's going to follow the volunteer standards of conduct. This is one of the requirements. Okay. By the way, on this document, the 13615, also is a paragraph about the liability protection that you have when you follow the rules of the program. Okay. Really, anybody who prepares a tax return must certify at the level required from the complexity of the return. What does that mean? So on this intake interview sheet, there are 3 different designations: B for basic, A for advanced, and M for military. So if you have an issue that's related to one of those classifications, you must have passed the either basic or advanced or military certification to do that return. Puerto Rico is another one. Puerto Rico, again, we don't do those in this area, but if you're in Central Florida, you betcha you're going to learn how to do Puerto Rico returns. You get a lot of immigrants that file Puerto Rico returns. Everybody takes the volunteer standard of conduct. Most take the intake interview test, and then preparers move on to take the tax law certification test. This applies mostly to us as site coordinators, not to you as preparers. We need to make sure we have a process that we timely file all of the tax returns that have been prepared. Once a return has been prepared, that doesn't mean it's been electronically filed with the IRS. We have to establish that process for our sites. There also must be publicly available and visible a civil rights poster that basically says we're going to be here to serve all people. When we submit an electronic form, it's got to have the right site identification number so they know who originated it. And if we're also an electronic filing number, okay. Not to be concerned about those kinds of things. That's something that we site coordinators take care of, but it's part of these QSR questions. And finally, security. We must have the capability to protect particularly public or private information. We don't leave tax returns on the table. We don't leave W-2s sitting around. If they're in a room and taxpayers are in the room with us, we're careful about how they can look at screens of other people. So you protect the security. Most of us have a locked cabinet at our actual sites where we protect information that we prepared, or we take it home and protect it at home in our own security. Okay, that was volunteer standard of conduct number 1 and all of the subpieces. Volunteer standard conduct 2. We're a free tax organization. You are not allowed to accept payment. We are not allowed to ask for a donation for doing any kind of return for our taxpayers. To the extent that, very specifically, we are not to have a donation or a tip jar located in the tax preparation area of the buildings that we are using. That's a direct violation of this particular standard. Also, don't get involved between the IRS and the customer, particularly in doing with payments. We should only allow payments to go to tax accounts of the actual taxpayer, not to any volunteer or other third party. An exception might be, okay, I'm doing a tax return for a child and the deposits go into mom's account. That one's okay. But not the friend's account. Look at this example buried in the middle. A taxpayer says, boy, you guys did a great job. I am so grateful. Please, here's $20. You know, if I had gone across the street to Joe's tax prep service, it would have cost me 10 times that amount. You know, the taxpayer's right. It would have been about $200 for an average return that we prepare. And we do it for free. We do the e-filing for free. But no, we are not to accept that $20 as a payment. We have to say, sorry, we do not accept payment. We are a free tax service. And we actually tell people to take the money back. All right. Also, you as a preparer or a greeter or a screener cannot solicit business from a taxpayer. So if you happen to be an accountant and have a for hire tax service on the side, you can work at VITA. That's not a problem, but you can't solicit business for people who are potentially out of scope. We also can't sell anything at a VITA site. The example given here about even candy orders or cookie orders from your kid's school. Okay. We don't want any kind of quid pro quo of any kind of you're doing this in return for that. This is all about we're offering this free service to the public for those who meet our criteria. Okay. Number 4, don't knowingly prepare false returns. Well, most of us aren't going to try to do this. Most of us are going to say, I understand what the rules are. All right. Where it gets a little bit tricky is what about stuff that's not reported to the IRS? It's not on the W-2. It's not on a 1099. And that usually takes place in the form of cash. So where is cash transacted? Well, particularly people who have private businesses or small businesses. Sometimes they're paid on a 1099 and sometimes they're paid what's affectionately known as under the table in cash. People in certain professions get a lot of cash tips. You need to report the cash tips. Even to the point of the IRS had made this point very specifically a couple of years ago, interest. You get a 1099 if you've got interest, but only if the interest is $10 or more. So we're to ask, do you have any other interest besides the $10 that's reported? We want to know all of the cash income that's coming in. All right. Anything that is said, anything that is heard, anything that is seen is to be part of the return. If the person says, no, I have none, we accept that. It's their return. They've got the liability. We are following what they say. But we are to do, I'll cover this a little more, a decent amount of due diligence to say, do you have any other cash income that's not on the various return papers that are submitted? Okay. Excuse me. Don't engage in criminal, dishonest, notoriously disgraceful conduct. Why? We're a free tax service from the IRS, sponsored by the IRS, funded by the IRS and United Way, and we don't want to be a discredit to the program. Okay? So we are held to some minimal ethic standard to say we don't want disabled or people that are dishonest. Obviously, if you are have a problem with a false return, you're going to get basically disbarred from the program. Okay, but even outside the program, if you are I think one of the test questions talks about embezzlement. You know, if you are charged with embezzlement, we probably don't want you in the program. Okay. We're going to assume everybody on the call is not that type of person. We are here as a volunteer to help people in our community. But recognize that's one of the criteria. Treat all taxpayers in a professional, courteous, and respectful manner. This goes both ways. We expect our taxpayers to respect and be courteous to us, preparers and site coordinators too. All right. I love this line they have buried down here. When you're in a situation and you're in a little bit of a how come or why not or like that, take a deep breath, courteously explain every return is different. Your situation is like this. You know, if you need to see my publication guide, I've got it here. I can show you. This is where it says this is the tax law. Okay. But be courteous to people. You know, obviously that means people who have a bit of issue with some people. I get a lot of retired people at my site. We sometimes have to help them fill out this intake form just because their vision is not good. We've learned to have a pair of readers at the front desk for people who forget their readers. First time taxpayer comes in who has a small business and brings in her shoebox of receipts. We'll sit down and tell people this is what you need to add up and put on the form that we have for small businesses. But we don't add it up for them normally. We actually have them do it. But we do that in a courteous way. All right, let's help you. I mentioned this earlier. We have to walk this fine line between due diligence, asking people, asking appropriately probing but not intrusive questions, balanced by we rely on the taxpayer to tell us in good faith accurate information. So due diligence, I gave you kind of the cash example. Due diligence might also be, okay, I see that you have a Social Security statement. Due diligence says, do you have any other pension income or any other retirement income? Oh yeah, I forgot that form. It's at home, or it hasn't come yet, but I thought, well, I'd go ahead and get started. No, we want to see all your forms when we do the return. So due diligence could be a matter of just completeness, but due diligence is also a matter of saying, like in a health savings account, there's a requirement that the expenses be used only for medical expenses. So we're to ask that question of the taxpayer. How did you, the right way to ask the question is not, you used all of these for medical, correct? The correct way to answer the question is, what did you use these expenses for? Okay. Make it more open-ended and have them give us the correct answer. That's what due diligence is about. Okay. I think that's it for this particular publication for the standard of conduct. We're now going to go back to my other screen. Okay. If you have the capability, open your web browser, log into this particular website, www.linklearncertification, all one word, no spaces.com. I'm going to walk you through how you set up a IRS account for as a tax preparer or greeter. Giving you a moment or two to do that. If you were successful, you should see this landing page. LinkLearnCertification.com gets you to VITA CTE Central. On the left-hand column, there's a entry that says create a new IRS account. Click on that button, create account. All right. Since most of you have your cameras off, I can't see if you are having trouble with that or not. If you are, throw something quickly into the chat, but we will move to the next screen. When you get in to create an account, there are 3 or 4 pages of registering yourself. So we are a VITA volunteer. So we're part of group 1. Make that check mark. We, as a new preparer, do not take the site certification test, so that's a no. You are not an instructor, so that's a no. You don't work for the IRS as a territory manager, so that's a no. But yes, you do plan to volunteer in the VITA TCE program. Why else would you be taking this test? And for training, let's list the training source as other. It's one of the options in the dropdown. Okay, pretty easy stuff. Next page, tell us who you are, but make sure you use the legal name that shows on your driver's license. This is a requirement of a couple of years ago to make sure that we were all using the same ways to describe ourselves. I used to be Jim. According to this, I'm James because my legal name is James. Add your last name. Skip the third box, that's only for IRS employees. Create your own personal username. Create a password. Confirm your password. Enter your email address. Confirm your email address. Pretty standard stuff. But recognize that email address is important because if you ever need to get a new password, it will only be sent to that particular email address that you have registered. All right. Next screen. Tell us what time zone you're working from. We are GMT -5 Eastern. Tell us which organization you're part of. We are United Way of Greater Cincinnati. We're not a particular site location, we're the overall organization, United Way. Number of years you have volunteered. The correct answer for new people is 1, not 0. This is your first year of volunteering. This next drop down about continuing education credits is circled and highlighted. We'll come back to that on the next screen. You do not need to enter a PTIN number or the name that shows on the PTIN card. And no, we do not need a CTEC number, whatever that is. Okay. Continuing education. Some volunteers can earn what's known as continuing education credits for volunteering as an advanced preparer in the VITA program. But you need to be either an enrolled agent, which is a IRS classification, a certified public accountant, a certified financial planner, or an attorney. If you are one of these, it is critical that you properly mark and indicate which of these you are, okay? Or you will not get the continuing education credits. On the 13715 that gets printed after you take your certification test, it shows us whether or not you have indicated or requested the CE credits. I'm very fortunate. I happen to have a couple of retired CPAs that work at my location. I always make sure that they have properly filled this out so they get their CE credits. Okay. Hopefully you've all registered. You've got an account. Now we're actually going to go in and take the volunteer standard of conduct test. So go into the account. You get this VITA TCE Central at the top. There's a certification test button and there's a My Account button. The My Account button just shows you what you have just entered in your account. And if anything needs to change, that's where you make the change. We're going to focus on making sure you click on this next row, the Advanced tab. this is what it shows for my particular return or test. So I show the volunteer standard of conduct, intake interview. Because I'm a site coordinator, mine shows site coordinator exams, yours should not, and the actual advanced exam. You should see 3 courses under your advanced tab. Okay. What I want you to do now, if you're on this tab, go ahead and click Volunteer Standard of Conduct Exam. This very first test on the left. We've been talking about it most of the morning. And actually take the 10-question test. If you've got your books and you've been making notes, you can just take the answers. The answers in the book are exactly the same as what's on the test. Robert, we don't need to add a PTIN number. That's a personal tax identification number or a preparer tax information number. Leave that one blank.
Yeah, but it's telling me I need to put it in. It won't let me go forward.
Even if you have one, don't put it in.
No, that's what I'm saying. I didn't put anything in there, but it
Good.
says I need it. It says this field is required.
Yep.
So am I on the wrong place? I'm in the self-registration.
So you're looking at this screen, PTIN number?
It looks a little different. Let me go back to that link. I'm trying to do it on a different computer. So I didn't hit the link. So it should have been that link you put in here. Is that right? Certification D. Yeah, I'm on the self-registration IRS. So when I go to that self-registration central, I hit the create account, right?
Yeah. Have you? So Robert will come back and assist you a little more during the break, which follows the next couple of slides. Okay. Hopefully, most of you have been able to actually take the volunteer standard of conduct exam in Link Learn. You follow through the various questions, you've answered it, you've hit submit, and you've seen your score. And hopefully, most of you have passed. If any of you did not pass for some reason, it would probably be a good thing to review this training when it comes out next week as a recording to go through it again. Because if you've got to get 80% or more, and you can't do anything without passing this initial test. Okay. The second test is called Intake Interview and Quality Review. The training for it, the actual test is in the 6744 test booklet, pages 19 through 22. We're not going to do this test during the class this morning, during the webinar this morning. Rather, you'll do this on your own over the next couple of days. Again, we encourage you to take both the test and the retest to help ensure your understanding. And some additional training is provided in this publication that I was using this morning, the 4961, for intake, interview, and quality review test training, pages 20 to 25. Again, as you saw that particular publication, it's very easy to read, it's not technical, and it just helps guide you through the kinds of questions that you're going to need to answer in that test. How do you get to that test? You go back to where we were for the first test, lincolnlearncertification.com, log in with your ID and password, go to the certification tab, go to the certification test portion, go to the advanced tab, and now select the intake interview exam. Take your exam and hit submit, and your score will be shown. Again, do that at home. So, some of you who are here today are taking this training because I want to be a greeter, or I want to help with screening and intake. I want to be a translator or an interpreter, or I just want to provide some general support. If that's the scope and that's that's all you want to do, you are basically done with the training. That's all we're going to cover today that applies to you. However, we encourage you to stick around after the break to see what tax preparation actually looks like, even if it's not your primary interest. Stay and see what the process looks like. You may say, hey, I can do this. It's not that hard. Okay. Remember that there is an additional webinar after this one, in which we get into more tax law training. The first of those occurs next week, Saturday at 9 o'clock. And then there are two versions of it, or two sessions of it in January as well. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to give us a 10-minute break. We're going to make this 10:20. everybody come back. So if you need to take a break, this is the time to do it. Come back at 10:20. Separately, if any of you had a lot of struggles with that, what we've just been through, reach out to us through the chat and we'll see if we can help.
Hey, Jim, this is Marty Lenz. At the
Hi.
very beginning of the session, you talked about going onto the United Way website to make sure that we were listed, but I don't see any place to see whether I'm on the list or something. I mean, if I've signed up for this class, I'm assuming that I'm on the list.
I think you're on the United Way list if you've signed up for this class and you got the email from Renee.
Okay. I just didn't see any place on that site. And then you talked about the Mobilize. How do we
Yeah.
sign up for that?
So again, when you actually get these slides, there's a hyperlink under the word mobilize that will take you to the sign up sheet.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So yes, do it, but probably not this morning.
Okay.
Mhm.
Silly question, but your name sounds very familiar to me. Does my name sound familiar to you? Like I knew you, 40 years ago, probably.
30 years ago. Come on, Marty, give me a break.
Well, I think it was when we were kids, to be perfectly honest with you. Where'd you grow up?
So did I know you in College Hill? Is that what you're telling me?
Probably, yes. Did you go to St. Clair?
Two of my kids did. Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe I knew you from La Boida Woods.
No,
No.
but you know who's got their memory for that kind of stuff is my wife. I'll ask her. She'll remember you.
Like I said, your name just sounds familiar to me, and it's one of those things. I'm getting to that age where I start hearing names and think, I used to know somebody by that name.
Well, I lived in College Hill from 74 through 89.
Okay. Well, I grew up there. I lived there until about 70. Well, let's see.
Mhm.
69. Maybe I knew you. I don't know where I would have known you from then. Who knows?
Mhm. Okay. My clock says it's 10:20. So before we go to the next section, I see a couple of things in the chat. And I want to also open it up to any other general questions you may have based on what you've just seen. So I'm going to take us off of screen share. And let's see what we've got here. This issue about continuing education credits seems to have got a lot of activity in the chat. So I think Charles gave some very good responses to that. In particular, if you're a CPA, can you take the Circular 230 certification, which I did not even mention, instead of the advanced certification? Well, the answer is yes, but you do not earn any of the CE credits if you take that certification. The requirements of the program says it must be an advanced test certification in order to earn the CE credits. I can't explain that. I'm not a professional. I'm not an accountant. So, but that's the rules of the program. So make sure, even if you're a CPA, that you take the advanced test to make sure you can earn these CE credits. And then I see that Rob asked a question about a non-credentialed tax preparer. If you are such a, have that designation, yes, make sure you indicate that on your account. I have no idea what this AFSP is, but it's not something that's requested on the registration sheet for Link Learn. But if you are a non-credentialed tax preparer, please so indicate it. You will get the CE credits that way. So if you're looking at the screen and you're seeing what, Robert, you're seeing 4 courses. Is that from the slides? That was my screen that included site coordinator?
No, this is on my account. I see the site
On
coordinator.
your account. I wonder if you somehow indicated something on your registration in your profile that would generate a 4th course.
Let's see, it says, do you plan to volunteer in the BTA program? I put yes, is that correct?
Yes.
Go to the first question. Do you want to take the site coordinator certification? You want to indicate no there.
Yeah, that says no.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, mine does the same thing. I said no, and it shows the site coordinator certification test also. You can
Still
just ignore
comes
it.
up?
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, since I'm a site coordinator, I never realized that.
And you have no for, are you an instructor? I wouldn't think that would affect it, but.
Yeah, everything's no on mine except for the, do you plan to volunteer?
Okay. Interesting.
Are you all clicked on the basic tab on the Link Learn screen? Do you see the multiple tabs across the top?
Right, I was on the advanced.
So go click around and just to get a sense about different tabs there have different tests on them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they all have the coordinator exam for me.
The site coordinator. Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna be a site coordinator. No.
Yeah, mine does too. I think it must be
Yeah.
just a glitch in the software.
I think it's just confusing and you're absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, we could always use additional site coordinators, so just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Okay. Any other things from the chat or other perspective or other questions? You can unmute yourself and ask away. So either I put you all asleep, you've already given up and gone to a coffee break, or you're ready to start part 2. We're going to assume ready for part 2. Okay. Okay, actually preparing tax returns. So the question I always get asked by anybody who I meet, and I say that I do volunteer tax preparation, the first thing they ask me is, well, what software do you use? You certainly use TurboTax, don't you? And the answer is no, we use what the IRS provides us. It's a special version of TaxSlayer Pro. It's IRS provided software. It's funded by the IRS. They pay for it. They work with TaxSlayer as a company to produce this product for us. It adequately handles the types of returns that VITA needs to prepare. It does not handle every type of potential tax return. There are some things that it doesn't have the features to do. Some professional software and some for purchase software, for example, does a comparison of marrying filing joint, MFJ, versus marrying filing separate, MFS. We don't have that capability, that analysis built into the software. So if a taxpayer couple comes in and says, we want to see that comparison, we respectively chat with them, try and determine if we think there's a reason to separate the return. And if not, we go ahead and file a joint return. If they're not comfortable with that, we say, I'm sorry, we're going to have to refer you to a paid preparer or to for purchase software, and you can do it on your own. Because the software doesn't have the capability to do that comparison, and we don't have the time capacity to prepare 3 returns, one for taxpayer, one for spouse, and one for joint, which is what you would need to do. So again, good news is we get decent software. It's called TaxSlayer Pro. It handles the types of returns we need to do. Recognize it doesn't do everything. All right. How do you get to this software called TaxSlayer? Well, here's another login for you. https://vita.taxslayerpro.com. Okay. Notice that there is a universal password that has to get entered in order to get into this subsection that we're using called Practice Lab. And that universal password shows on your password sheet, Train Pro Web, all caps. You then follow through and create an account. With a username and password. This password has a little bit more challenge to it. It's got to be at least 15 digits, an upper, a lower, a special character, a number, all of that good stuff. Therefore, Make sure you write it down on your password sheet that we gave you when you confirmed your registration so that you remember it. This username and password in Practice Lab, just like the password and username and Link Learn certification, does not expire. I've been using the same one for years. Okay, so log into vita.taxlayerpro.com. You should see this landing page. It's got 3 different tabs across the top. The first one is Practice Lab. That's the one we're going to use. But there's also something called Pro Online. That's the mirror version of Practice Lab that we actually use. That's the live system to create returns. You can't get into that yet because you're not registered. But there is something else called the VITA TCE blog. So this is a blog posting put out by TaxSlayer announcing this is what's going on in the software and other announcements from the IRS. I encourage you to look at that blog on a somewhat regular basis. And if you really want to get involved, there's a way to get updates. Whenever that gets posted, you'll get an email. Anyway, back to Practice Lab. Select on that button, create an account. First thing it asks for when you create an account is your email address. Then username. Then this very complex password, which you need to confirm. And again, our advice to you is write it down. Under program type, one of the drop downs is VITA. Select VITA. The site identification number is not required. Please skip that field. The next box asks for a security question and a security answer. Pick your favorite question and your favorite answer that hopefully you would remember. Then click the button that says Create Account. It's that simple to create a TaxSlayer account in Practice Lab. Notice that I say in Practice Lab because the account that you will have, the username and password you will have in the live system will be different. This is just for use in Practice Lab. So hopefully you've created your account. You'll get to this landing page, says Practice Lab Home. There's a button up at the top that says Go to Practice Area. But before you click on that, I want you to scroll through the bottom portion of this page. And my screenshot only shows the very top parts of it. And included on here are various other guides and training tools that TaxSlayer provides to us. Okay. I believe it is section 6 that has some sample problems and has, here's what's new for 2022. We've got some interesting things that have already been posted. Most of those are brain sharp webinars that you can choose to listen to and watch for additional training. You don't have to do any of those, but I just want to make you aware that once you're into Practice Lab, you have that other training capability. Okay. Click on the Go to Practice Lab button. And I believe you're going to see the option to start a new return for 2022, or look at an existing return. Obviously, you're starting a new return. What we're going to do now is to begin a actual test problem out of the 6744 test booklet. So this is the scenario on page 95. We have Thomas Polk, age 40. He was widowed in 2019. He's got a daughter, Christina, that lives with him, age 6. Thomas manages and maintains the household, providing all of the cost, and provides over half of the support for Christina. When Thomas goes to work, he takes Christina to childcare at downtown daycare and pays childcare expenses. Thomas avails himself of the Affordable Care Act and buys health insurance for himself and Christina through the marketplace. As a result, he gets this form 1095A from the marketplace, usually comes out every January. Thomas and Christina are U.S. citizens and lived in the U.S. all year long. Okay, so that's the scenario. In order to get started on preparing a return, the first question we need to ask and determine is, what is Thomas's filing status? The IRS provides the capability for 5 different filing statuses, some of which apply, one of which will apply to every taxpayer's case. Well, what are those? We want to go to the 4012, page B10, and look at that flow chart to determine the information for Thomas and Christina, determine his filing status. 4012 B10, let's pop that open. Excuse me, I don't have it open, so I need to. .4012, this is the resource guide that we use. I need to find out about filing status. So we need to go to tab B in this report. You can also use the search button up here to find that as well. I prefer to navigate off the tabs because I'm familiar with the publication. And we're going to scroll down to the page that I want to walk through with you. Okay. So in the 4012 on page B10 is this flow chart. Top left corner, helpful, start here. Good place. Okay. So try to follow through with me. Was Thomas married on the last day of the year? Well, no, it says that his spouse died in 2019. So we come down the left column following the no, as opposed to the arrow to the right following yes. So not married. Did your spouse die during the year? No. This is a 2022 return. Spouse died in 2019. Next series of questions. Do all of the following apply? Did your spouse die in 2020 or 2021? And you did not remarry before the end of 2022? No. She died in 2019. So I don't even need to go to the next three questions before I can answer, no, that doesn't apply. But those other questions are whether or not somebody would qualify for this class filing status called qualifying surviving spouse, that in prior years used to be called qualifying widow or widower. So, not married at the end of the year. Spouse did not die this year. Spouse did not die in 20 or 21. So I'm on the bottom left-hand question box. Did you pay more than half the cost of keeping up your home? Yes. And do you have a qualifying person? Refers you to another chart to confirm that indeed Christina, his daughter, is a qualifying person who lived with him more than half the year. We finally get a yes, and it says that the answer is head of household. Okay. This particular chart is one that you will use, and this particular page is one that you will use several times when you're starting a tax return for a family in which there is some situation that's not obvious. If it's a married couple that comes in with no dependents, it's pretty simple. Normally marrying, filing joint. I do an awful lot of returns. The only person I'm talking about is a single person. So they're obviously single. They're not married. You get a whole bunch of no's. You end up with single. So you might want to earmark or tab this particular page in your 4012 when you get your hard copy. Okay. So I kind of gave you the answer to this question. What is Thomas's filing status? It's head of household. Let's see, do I have that open? I'm putting something up on my screen. Give me a second. So this is my access to Practice Lab. We go to Practice Area button. Click on that. I get two choices: start a new return or client search. So I want you to select new 2022 return. I'm going to select client search because I've already prepared this and I want to walk you through some of it. So the first screen that you see when you get to start new return, even before you tell them the name of the taxpayer, is filing status. I don't like it that way, but that's the way the software is constructed. Just recognize that's what it is. And from what we've already done, we've indicated and determined that Thomas's filing status is head of household. Next screen.
Hey, Jim, first we have to put the social security number in and select the profile, don't we?
I'm sorry, you're right. You got to put in a social security number. Social security number. Is 32800, and then you add any 4 digits that you want. I choose to use 2022 because it's a 2022 return, but that's just me. A lot of people just do 1, 2, 3, 4. Fun piece of trivia. The middle 2 digits of 00 means it's a fake social security number and cannot ever be transmitted to the IRS. So they're just taking that as a precaution that somehow you use one of these practice lab examples and create a live return. Okay. So do a social security number, then filing status, then actually fill in the information for Thomas. You can refer back to the question in the 6744 book, or you can just look on my screen. I've given you the relevant information about social security numbers and occupations and birthdays. But this is basically just a data entry aspect. Then below the occupation, there are 10 different or so checkboxes that may or may not apply. None of these apply in this particular case for Thomas Polk. But recognize that there are a lot of these other questions. Further down after that series of questions is the address block. The practice questions never give you an actual zip code. So just type in your own personal zip code. That's what 45140 is. That's my zip code in Loveland, Ohio. Once you type in the zip code, the software will pre-fill the name of the city and the state. You are required to enter a telephone number. Make sure it's not an actual telephone number. I believe 555-1212 used to be information. That's what I put in. Put in some fictitious telephone number. For all of my returning co-leaders, notice that the email block now shows on this first page as opposed to buried under the e-file section of the software. Okay. The client, the client email is not required because there is no red dot, red asterisk next to it. Yes, whoever was asking a question.
Jim, this is Charles. A question came up in the chat as far as which taxpayer profile should be selected. If you want to go over that.
Yeah, I have to go to a new return in order to show it. Why don't you just go ahead and make a comment? You're on there, Charles.
Well, the options are, basic, which no forms are pre-selected for you. I think there's a W-2 profile, and it automatically populates a W-2 for you. Usually I just start with basic without any selected forms, and then you can add the forms as you need them in preparing the return. If any of the other assistant trainers want to chime in, please do.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I normally do too, Charles, is just pick the basic and then pull the forms as I need them. Because otherwise, if you pick a different one, sometimes it will narrow you into just those forms, and then you have something else. So I think it's better to go through everything and look at what you have and then pull the forms you need.
Nothing like experience speaking to help guide us. I love it. Okay. Screen. What I want you to do is enter the personal information. That was the screens we were on. You need to add Christina as a dependent. There's a screen for dependency. Then enter the information for only his W-2 and his interest. There's other information in the question about childcare and about Affordable Care Act or marketplace insurance. I don't want you to do that yet. I only want you to do W-2 and interest. Okay. So you should be in the TaxSlayer software. You should be created a 2022 return for Thomas Polk. You're adding his daughter Christina as a dependent. You then go to income. Look for where it says W-2 and look for where it says interest and enter that information. The information is in the 6744 test booklet starting on page 95.
For you all using the electronic version of the Form 6744, you probably realize you're finding it annoying that the intake sheet is arranged vertically. And I don't know if the basic Adobe Acrobat software allows you to rotate that. If one of you all have that, see if you can do it. If not, I have a desktop version of that software where I can rotate it and save it to file, and I can upload that version onto Mobilize, and you would be able to download it from there. So it'll be in portrait form, you know, some of those forms. So if someone can, you know, let me know in the chat whether you can rotate it using the basic Adobe Acrobat software. Otherwise, I'll upload that, make that available on Mobilize.
You can't rotate it in basic, but I'm not on Mobilize yet, so I'm just having to look at it sideways.
Okay. I'll try to make that available and then by Monday on Mobilize. And if one of the assistant trainers can send in the chat how to do that, I've kind of forgotten about how to register on Mobilize, but
So the related comment to that is it would really be helpful for you to, when we get to the very end, make sure you go and get your actual 6744 hard copy books. It's a lot easier to have the book open and while you're working in the software on your screens. Because you can turn the book sideways and then you can read that form much easier.
Is there somewhere that we can get them hard copy, or do we just need to print them out ourselves?
Now, we'll get to that screen at the end. There's
Okay,
4 different places you can go to pick them up.
okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I have flipped the screen you're seeing back to my version of taxplayerpro.com practice lab, the Thomas Polk beginning problem that we're having you go through. Okay. We did filing status. We did personal information, dependents. We've added daughter Christina. We've given her social security number and indicated that she is a daughter and her date of birth. So the actual entry screens look like this. The page I was on is kind of the summary. Again, I will point out that like the taxpayer information, even on dependents, there are a number of additional questions or options that may apply. If this dependent, for example, is a college student over age 18, and you're still providing support. If the child is disabled. Okay. So recognize that there are A, a lot of capability in the software, and B, a lot of places you just need to learn to navigate as the circumstances dictate. Okay. Once you get through dependent, we're done with all that. We do not have an IRS identity PIN number to add. It's not provided to us in the problem. It then goes to income. And the first form we see is Form W-2. Well, good, that's what we had. We had a W-2 for Thomas. You check to edit that. This little pencil icon is the edit button. Okay. The W-2 entry screen. So EIN, employer identification number. This is the official IRS number for the employer who is issuing the W-2 and giving it to Thomas. Okay. We want to ensure that the employer name and address on the W-2 is what shows on this entry screen. Obviously, in these test problems, except for the zip code. All right. Then we get to enter a bunch of numbers. The amount of wages that shows in box 1. The amount of taxes withheld that shows in box 2. And then if you were actually doing this in TaxSlayer, you would have noticed that the Social Security wages and Medicare wages in boxes 3 and 5 automatically flowed from box 1, the 41,000. But that's not what it says on the W-2. So you need to manually overwrite the 41,000 to 42,000 for boxes 3 and 5. When you do that, you will get the appropriate amount in box 4 and 6, Social Security tax and Medicare tax. Those are just formulas. So, Jim, why aren't wages the same as Social Security wages? Well, because box 12, code D, says $1,000. Well, great. What is code D? Well, code D, again, something you can search for in your 4012 resource guide. And one of the people on the chat will probably know what page that's on. Will indicate that code D is a at-work contribution to a retirement plan. Code D means a 401k. So Thomas is an employee of this company. He's part of the retirement plan, and he chose to contribute $1,000 throughout the year into his retirement plan. Because it's in a retirement plan, it's not taxed as current income. That's why the wages amount is $41,000 instead of $42,000. However, you'll notice that FICA taxes, Social Security and Medicare, doesn't care about that. They want their money on the first, on all of it, on all 42,000. There are numerous different codes that show up in box 12. It's important that you enter what is shown on box 12 and the amounts, and it will flow to the appropriate portions in the software. Box 13 is simply a checkbox. Yes, he's in a retirement plan as indicated. Finally, at the bottom of the W-2, it has information about state withholding. And it says he withheld $800 against state taxes. Well, I'm an Ohio resident, so I enter Ohio. If you're a Kentucky resident, you can enter Kentucky. Make sure you indicate the amount of state wages that are taxable. Okay. I asked you to do something else after the W-2. And that is to enter the interest. Well, this third entry, Schedule B Forms 1099 INT DIV OID. Well, isn't that Greek? Well, the INT means interest, income, or dividends. So you click that button for an entry. The first row is interest or dividends. Click that. You click the entry button, and now you enter information about the interest income that shows up on the 1099 INT that's provided in the test problem. Now, my particular entry process is to make sure I enter information for every entry that has the red asterisk. And I skip boxes that don't apply to the return that do not have a red asterisk. So even though the address for Adelphi blank is provided, I did not enter it. Because it's not required to actually submit the tax return. Then toward the bottom section, there are all these different entry boxes that may apply to a 1099 INT for interest income. The two that we were provided are box 1 and box 2. We didn't see anything for boxes 3 and higher, nor do we have any state withholding shown on the 1099 INT, which is common. On a W-2, yes, there's almost always going to be state withholding. On interest and dividends, it's almost never going to be state withholding. Okay. You finish the entry for the interest. Yep, that looks right. You go to continue. You go to continue. Is there any other income? Nope. That's all I wanted you to do is those two things. You hit continue. Are there any other things I need to take care of that are special? Again, in this simplified problem, no. Hit continue. Other taxes to apply? Nope. Hit continue. Any payments that have been made? Not withholding, actual payments or estimated payments? Nope. Hit continue. Any miscellaneous forms? Nope. It then will prompt you directly to the health insurance section. Before you get to a state section, it's going to take you to healthcare. Because I didn't want you to enter the 1095A, I'm going to say, no, he did not have healthcare insurance under the Affordable Care Act. But that's just for this preliminary part of the problem, okay? So I don't want you to be confused by that when you're actually going through it. In the sample scenario, only interest, only W-2, this is a no. When you come back on your own and actually do the problem at home, this will become a yes, and you'll see an entry screen for the 1095A. But we're not going to do that here. You go to continue, and it goes directly into the state section. Well, this is fun. States are not yet available in TaxSlayer Practice Lab 2022. They usually become available about the first of the year. So because we're still in mid-December, not yet. But they will populate sometime in early January. But since we're just going to focus on the certification test, and that only requires federal, we can go ahead and safely hit continue here. It then brings you up to a screenshot of the 1040, which is the standard reporting document for all individual tax returns. But notice that there is some stuff hidden over here in blue, and there's some stuff over here in blue. So again, a known issue with TaxSlayer. They're working on it. It will get resolved. But we encourage you to go up here to the top where it says View Print Return and click that little button there. That gets you to another screen that says Print Results. And yes, I want to print my tax return. You click that button, and that opens a PDF that I now need to share. Okay. So check me, am I on the practice lab printed return?
No, we're seeing the decision tree.
We're on the wrong screen, I'm sorry. I gotta get back here. Technology, I love it. Scenario. There I am.
You got it now.
I know. Thank you. Okay. This PDF that's generated from Practice Lab looks like this. It gives you kind of a summary page at the top with some information about what's included. It gives you a summary of the W-2. It gives you a modified W-2 format. So this format will look the same on everything that's generated by Practice Lab or by the actual tax software, but may be in a different format than what the actual physical W-2 looks like that the taxpayer brings in. So just recognize that difference. I so wish that they all would be the same, but they're not. Finally, I get down to the $1040. So as a quick review of the 1040, very top of the page, it gives you filing status. Remember that we indicated that Thomas was head of household. His name is shown, his social security number is shown. On the actual software, you'll actually see his full social security number, so you can confirm that. Address. The default is that he did not receive or sell or buy or exchange or gift any digital assets, better known as cryptocurrencies. Okay. But that's one of the questions that's actually on the intake sheet, that we need to determine if he had any digital assets or cryptocurrencies. Finally, there's a section for dependents. This is where Christina's name and social shows up. And notice it indicates that she qualifies for the child tax credit. But we didn't do anything with the child tax credit. And my answer is the software is so smart. Based on what we put in, based about the child's age, based upon that she's a dependent, it says that she qualifies for the child tax credit. Then the form goes on to say what was his income, Thomas's income. Remember the 41,000 that was taxable on his W-2? That shows up here in box 1A or line 1A. He didn't have any other type of income, so that's the subtotal on 1Z. 2B shows his taxable interest. That was the $130 that showed up on INT. So now I get a subtotal of 41,130. Then I see this adjustment on line 10 of $26. What was that all about? Did we ever enter a $26? Ah, we did. But it says if you want to be sure, go back and look at Schedule 1. So scroll down a couple of pages to Schedule 1. And on the second page, it says that was the penalty on early withdrawal of savings that we entered from his INT, $26. And that gets subtotal at the bottom to 26. And that comes back up to line 10 on the 1040, which is where we were. Okay, 41,104 is the net. So that is his adjusted gross income. That's a term that a lot of people will talk to and talk about, and it's a number that then will determine a whole bunch of other potential credits and implications throughout the rest of the tax return. The adjusted gross income. Why is it adjusted? Is because, just as we saw in this example, I've got gross income and I get to subtract a few adjustments. So this is gross income or net income after adjustments. Then there's something called the standard deduction in this case. Again, the software automatically indicated the standard deduction based upon what we told him or told it about the profile for Thomas, and that he is of a certain age, he's not blind, and therefore the standard deduction is this amount of money for head of household. If he was single, it would be a different standard deduction. Finally, we get to the bottom of page 1, and it says taxable income. So taxable income is the amount of AGI after the standard deduction. Well, why is it important? It's because that's how the actual income tax is computed. It's computed on this 21,704. It's not computed on the 41,104. Where does that calculation take place? In the magic black box of TaxSlayer. If you want to actually see the calculation for it, you can go into various publications and it'll show you where it comes from. But trust the software on this. The amount of tax on 21,704 for head of household is 2314. Remember before I mentioned that he qualified for the child tax credit because of Christina. So that shows up here. What's this? What's this $100? Other amount from Schedule 3. Oh, gee, where's Schedule 3? Well, scroll down. Schedule 1, Part 2, Schedule 3. Something called a retirement savings contribution credit. And the details show on Form 8880. Well, if you want to know what that looks like, you can scroll down further until we find Form 8880. It's in here somewhere. Here it is. And it says, oh, you, the taxpayer, Thomas, made an elective deferral to a 401k or other qualified plan of $1,000. Where did that come from? Remember that $1,000 W-2 line 12 code D that automatically came over and populated this worksheet to calculate the potential that is subject to a retirement savers credit. It then goes through this calculation that says what is the factor that applies for head of household with his income. The answer is 0.1, so he gets 10%. and therefore he gets a $100 credit on his taxes for making this contribution. So what does that mean? Well, at work, he decided, yeah, I'm going to contribute $1,000 to my retirement plan. But when he actually files his tax return, he gets $100 of that back, or in the form of lower taxes paid. So net to him was $1,000 in my retirement plan, and it really only cost me, quote unquote, $900. Not a bad deal. Okay, we do some subtotal, we do some subtraction. It says, okay, I now have a tax that is still due of $214. So remember on line 16, we started with 2,300. We got a couple of credits of 2,100. So now I still owe 214. But wait, I really don't owe that, because I had withholding of $1,900 per my W-2. Yeah, I remember that. Gee, that was what, $125 a month coming out of my paycheck? Yeah. And what's this? I qualify for something called the Earned Income Credit, another $378. Well, the Earned Income Credit is because his income was of such a level and because he had one dependent. So we get in the Earned Income Credit calculation sheets, and it says $378 is the amount of that credit. So now it says, quote unquote, I've made payments of $22.78, withholding plus refundable credits, $22.78. I compare that with total tax, $214, and I get a nice refund of $2,064. All right. Another little interesting, if he's making direct deposit of that refund, the checking routing number and account numbers will show here if we had entered those into the software. I also want to point out this particular row here, third-party designee. Do you want another person to discuss this return with the IRS? And the answer that we always default to is no, and this is automatic in the software, okay? Because we are not representing the taxpayer. If the taxpayer has an issue with this return with the IRS, it's between them and the IRS. It's not between them, the IRS, and the VITA site or the VITA preparer. We are always a no on this question because we are not a paid preparer. We're not a designated representative. Okay. So somewhat laboriously, I took you through that, but maybe you were able to glean a couple of things. From what we did. So let me stop there. Do you have questions at this point about what we have just gone through? I don't know if you were able to do it yourself online, but hopefully walking through it, when you do it yourself, it's going to be very straightforward to you. Anybody with questions? Okay. Your homework, having done that, is to first finish the intake interview test. Remember, we talked about that just before the break. Then continue working on this Polk scenario, the Thomas Polk scenario. Go through the entire Polk scenario, including the parts that we skipped. So including the daycare and including the insurance. As you're doing that and you're referring back and forth, you're going to be back and forth into the 4012 and the 6744 often. Use the 4012 to help you walk through, how do I answer these questions? How do I make sure I'm doing it correctly? List up your questions. Bring them to the next session. We can bring that as we begin. All right. Okay. I'm going to skip a few slides to get to it, one at the end that I need to show you, and then I'm going to come back. Resource guides. We've been talking about these all morning. The 4012, the resource guide. The 4961, standard of conduct training. There's a more exhaustive training guide called the 4491. If you choose, you can look at that one. That is a guide that's much more comprehensive. It actually has test questions with answers that kind of help you through some additional training. This slide will be a part of this posting that gets sent to you. These are where you can pick up the 4012 and the 67 books. Obviously at United Way, downtown on Reading Road. But also up north at Ohio Means Jobs in Butler County, Fairfield, just a little bit north of Jungle Jim's. That's my reference point for Fairfield. In Northern Kentucky, at the Center for Great Neighborhoods in Covington. Or at my actual site in Loveland on Lebanon Road, the Care Center. So this gives you addresses, locations, and the time that the sites are open for you to come by and pick up your books. Okay. All right. So I wanted to stop there. And just say it's 11:35 or almost. I wanted to offer you some, hey, how do I start to think about some of the issues that we're going to face ourselves with when I go through these various test questions. I've done a little bit of that with Thomas and his daughter, Christina. That one was relatively simple. I want to give you a little bit more complex one and just show you how I would walk myself through it. Okay. So what's a dependent? Well, a dependent can be something called a qualifying child, a qualifying relative. Well, what's the difference? Why are there two different ones? Okay. So we need to determine, here's the scenario. Let's see, is that big enough that you can see it? Barbara is 54, widowed many years ago in 1999. She owns her home, keeps it up, has income. Jenny's daughter, Barbara, age 25, and her daughter or her granddaughter, Molly, shows up, age 3. Everybody moves in with Barbara in January of 2022. Stayed for the rest of the year. Jenny wasn't employed, but was able to collect unemployment of $13,000. That 13,000 was used by Jenny to provide more than half of her, Jenny's, support. Molly, the 3-year-old, did not provide any of her support. A little rascal, I tell you. So we're going to have to answer the question, who can Molly claim as a dependent? I'm sorry, who can claim Molly as a dependent? Is it Barbara? Is it Jenny? Is it both? Is it neither? And then when you think you got that figured out, who can claim the earned income credit for Molly? Okay, so let me walk you through this. Try to get into your mind that there's these 4 types of items that need to be addressed: relationship, age, residency, and support. For a qualifying child, there needs to be a relationship. The taxpayer's child, sibling, or their children. Seems to include the baby. Qualifying child must also be less than 19, or a student less than 24, or disabled. Doesn't sound good for the daughter. Residency, lived with the taxpayer more than half the year. Yeah, that sounds good. And the qualifying child, the baby, provides less than half of her support. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So if I go back to the scenario, I got a 3-year-old living with Barbara and living with Jenny. The first question is Jenny a dependent of Barbara? Is the daughter a dependent of grandma? Yes, a child, but no age. She doesn't qualify because of age. Residency, yes. Support, yes. Relationship, yes. Age, no. You got to be all 4. 3 out of 4 doesn't get you there. It's got to be all 4. So the daughter is not a qualifying child of grandma, even though she's living in grandma's house. Well, is she something called a qualifying relative if she's not a qualifying child? Let's go over the questions that are a little bit different for qualifying relative. Relationship, relative, like we saw before, or get this, anyone living with the taxpayer all year long. You don't even need to be related. You can have someone living in your house all year long and potentially classify them as a dependent through qualifying relative. Age, no restriction at all. Could be somebody younger, could be somebody older. A qualifying relative could be even your mother who doesn't live with you, because only the non-relative must live with you all year. A relative could live any place. But here's the thing that trips up most people it's a support test. The taxpayer must provide more than half of the support for the dependent or potential dependent, and not or, and the qualifying relative's income must be less than $4,500 in the entire year. Well, remember our questions or our scenario? Sorry. Jenny had unemployment income, 13,000 provided, and it says provided more than half of her support. So the daughter is not a qualifying relative because of the support test. The taxpayer did not provide more than half of the test, and also the qualifying relative's income was way more than the 4,500. So what we're doing is confirming that the daughter is not a dependent of mom or the grandma. Okay? The daughter and the grandchild that moved in, the daughter's not a dependent of grandma. She's not a qualifying child because of the age test. She's not a qualifying relative because of the support test. But then there is something similar, but again, not identical, is the criteria for the earned income test. Again, go back to these 4 items: relationship, age, residency, and support. Relationship still must be related. Okay? So if you have someone who's not related to you living in your house as a qualifying relative all year, they don't qualify for earned income because there's no relationship. Age, back to the same as it is for a qualifying child: less than 19, a student, less than 24, or disabled. And finally, residency, live with the taxpayer more than half the year. Doesn't need to be the full year. But a big difference with earned income test, the support question is not relevant. You don't have to support or not support the person. They only need to live with you. Okay, so try and get in your mind these 4 key things: relationship, age, residency, support, and recognizing that they're a little different between qualifying child, qualifying relative, and earned income. Parts of them are the same, parts of them are different, but they all have different implications on scenarios like the one we have here. So we determined that Molly, the baby age 3, cannot be we determined that Jenny, the daughter, cannot be a dependent of Barbara, the mother. Can Molly be a dependent of grandma? Is she related? Yes. She under 19? Yes. Does she live with me more than half the year? Yes. Is she providing more than half of her own support? No,
No.
not Molly. So Molly could be a dependent of Barbara. But you also need to determine if Molly could be a dependent of Barbara. So again, Molly is young enough for age. Yes, she's related, daughter. Residency, yes, she lived with mom the entire year. And she did not provide her support. So can Molly be a dependent of either? Or can Molly only be a dependent for Jenny? And further, who can claim EIC for Molly? Can Barbara do it? Can Jenny do it? Could either do it? Where do you find the answers to this? I kind of walked you through part of it here. The 4012, again, is going to be your reference guide. Look for the other comments that apply to these different scenarios. By the way, I didn't make up this question. This is an actual test question of a couple years ago. It's not a current test question, so I don't mind sharing it with you, but it's a test question a couple years ago. And these are the types of situations that we sometimes encounter. Multi-generational households tend to be some of the more complex things we encounter. Who's a dependent of whom, and to whom, who can claim the EIC? But I really have found in teaching this over the years that this trying to understand these 3 slides, relationship, qualifying child, qualifying relative, EIC, and the sameness and the differences between them help you understand how to answer questions like this. Now, what happens in real life? Multi-generational household comes in, they get their taxes done. Sometimes the daughter comes in with mom, sometimes they come in without mom. You need to resolve this in your interview. Because the first thing you need to do in an interview is understand all of these ins and outs so you can determine what's the filing status and who's a dependent. So sometimes the discussions are brief. It's a married couple or a single person. Sometimes they're much more elaborate because part of the intake interview says, who else is living in the house? And you get into these kinds of scenarios. Okay. Again, kind of wrap up the 4012. As I said at the very beginning, I've been doing this a long time. But even when I take the test, the basic test or the advanced test, and I take both of them every year, I often refer to the 4012 about what little nuance are they asking me in the question. So have that available, have it open, either on your screen or hard copy. Use it, make notes in it, highlight it, do whatever you need to do. The rest of these are training guides to help you through the actual test. But the 4012, you're going to use that throughout the season, actually preparing returns. Get used to it, navigate through it, put the tabs in, understand what's where. Again, as a reminder, 4 different places to pick up your guides, the 4012, the 6744. These other training guides you have to download. These we have hard copies for you. And it's not that we didn't order the other ones, it's that the IRS no longer prints the other ones. They're only available online. Okay, I've given you some homework. You're trying to do this, you're still stuck. What do? Well, one option is to send us an email. Send it to free tax at United Way Greater Cincinnati, UWGC.org. Shayla will read those and either answer it herself or send it to one of us trainers, and we will get back to you. Make sure you give us your contact information, name, email, and phone, so we can do that. We're here to help you through this training. We're here to help you get through the certification test. We will not give you the answers. That's part of our ethics. We will help you and guide you through, oh, notice on page 4012 D3, it says this. How do you think that applies? Okay. When you're actually doing tax preparation at a tax site, you're not there by yourself. You're there with other people with experience. You've got a site coordinator who has to have passed at least the advanced level. We're there. We work as a team when we're actually doing the actual returns. You're doing all of the entry, but any questions you've got, you're up talking to your site coordinator or your peer that's sitting at the table next to you. Okay. You've got this. You can do it. That's it. Thank you. We hope you come back for the second portion of tax law, part B. Even if you think, still, I'm not sure. I just want to be a greeter or a screener. Well, maybe you want to just sit through that next session as well. You'll find out that most of our tax work is very straightforward. The more you know about VITA and the tax law, maybe you can help families that seek our service. That's great. I love this one. I know who wrote this, and it wasn't me. You'll be a tax guru in no time. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Everybody should be visible to each other now. If you've got questions now about something we've gone over, shout them out. If you've got other questions about tax law, shout them out. We'll either say, yeah, we'll get to that next week, or we'll say, yeah, generally it looks like this. If you want to say, boy, that was great, thank you very much, I'm going to go have my lunch, that's fine too.
Well, Jim, I asked in the chat just a second ago, how do we get assigned to a site to actually work? What's the process?
Well, usually Keith and I wrestle over it. Because we're always looking for more people. The best way to start that seriously is to contact Shayla and say, I live here or I work here. Where's a close by site?
Okay.
Okay. I live in Loveland. And while I love the people that I train with in Northern Kentucky, I don't want to work in Northern Kentucky. It's too far of a drive. So yeah, she's got a list of all of the sites. She knows who's looking for people. She knows if certain sites are already filled. So contact Shayla is the best way to do that.
Where would you find that?
Matt, are you still on the call?
Matt logged off a little bit ago. He's not on here right now.
All right. So at one time, there used to be a map that showed where all the sites were located. That's why I was going to ask him if that's been updated. Good question. How do you find a site?
Where would you find the contact information for that person? Oh, okay, perfect.
For Shayla, it's on the PowerPoints.
And I just posted her email address.
Yep.
Another way, if you're registered on Mobilize, that's a good way to find out sites that are in need of volunteers on a particular Saturday, you know, where there's maybe a shortage of volunteers. So that's another reason to be registered on Mobilize.
Well, I'm encouraged. The first two questions were about sites. This is great. That means you want to come back.
Well, I'm already an EA, so the training of how to do taxes is less important for me.
How would you post like your availability for volunteering, or is it just like you show up when you have availability? Or
Adrian, how do you do it?
So I have a list of, I work in Madisonville. Usually we're at the rec center. This year we might be at the library. And so we keep a list of our volunteers, and then I contact them and I say, okay, here's the dates that we're in operation. And then the volunteers tell me which days that they can come. And then we work from there as to how many clients we schedule based on how many volunteers we have schedule. I think everybody kind of has a different way of doing it. So usually you work with a site coordinator at whatever site you're going to work at.
Yeah, at my site, we have a preliminary schedule that says these are the days, we know the days of service and the hours of service. We have people tell me in early January, this is when I expect to be able to serve. It's either, for example, yeah, I'm there every Tuesday night except for this one, or I'm there every Saturday morning except for that one. And then I have that schedule, and then as life happens, people need to leave. Yes, we do have people who are snowbirds and take off 2 weeks and go to Florida, but we still love them and still have them back when they come back. So yeah, just let us know when you can serve. But it usually starts with, as Adrian was saying, contact the site coordinator and see what their process is.
Another thing to be aware of is it's possible to volunteer at more than one site. So if you geographically it works for you and maybe one day at one site works and another at another, you can do that also.
Oh, speaking from Kathy, who volunteers at least 2 that I know of.
Only 2.
I think Adrian's at multiple sites. I know I'm at multiple sites.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing I just want to emphasize is the test taking. We're really encouraging you to take the advanced test because that makes you capable of doing any return in scope that comes in the door. You don't need to take the basic test to take the advanced test. You can jump right in. I'm not advocating either approach, but I just want to lay out that there's no requirement to take basic before advanced or to take basic at all once you've passed the advanced.
And for our site coordinators, understand too, as a new volunteer, you know, coming in with the advanced certification, we're not gonna throw you in for an advanced return with, you know, itemized deductions and, you know, HSA and this and that. It just gives us, you know, a little more latitude, you know, if we're pressed for an advanced return, we can give maybe a simplified advanced return to you. And you work at your own pace. And remember, again, you have people behind you, the site coordinator, and at any time you feel uncomfortable in doing that particular return, just express that to the site coordinator and they'll accommodate you.
And typically site coordinators will pair new volunteers with experienced people for the first week or 2. So you're not thrown right into it. You sit side by side and watch someone do the returns.
Or the first return or 2.
Yeah.
Not a week.
No, yeah, more clear. Thank you.
So one of the things that just kind of casually got mentioned there was scope. What's in scope? What's out of scope? What can we do? What can't we do? Are there income limits? That's another aspect of scope in my mind. So last year, VITA program set a income limit of $80,000 per tax return. We didn't make a distinction between joint or single or head of household. We just said 80,000 per return. If you're underneath that, please come. We'd love to try to help you. If you're above that, we knew that we were turning people away who had that need, particularly late in the season with lower income. So we were just trying to preserve our own capacity for people who really had the compelling need. Yeah, it's much better to go to our site for free than it is across the street for $200. Okay. And that's a lot more meaningful to people with low to moderate income versus moderate to higher income. Okay. So, but also in terms of scope, there are certain types of income that we're not allowed to do. It primarily gets into people with small businesses. You cannot have inventory. You cannot have a business loss. You cannot have employees. You cannot have an asset that you need to depreciate, like a car or a piece of equipment. We can't do farm income as a separate example. We can't do clergy returns. Even though several of us work at churches, we can't do clergy returns because of something called housing allowances that clergy often get. So recognize that there's some limitations, some areas that we are not allowed to do. And that's all part of the original screening process. When you sit down with the taxpayer and before you actually start the return in TaxSlayer, you're going through in your mind and saying, is this return in scope? Okay. And if somebody needs to be turned away because it's out of scope, usually I have that discussion as a site coordinator rather than the preparer. So different sites may operate differently, but that's how I choose to handle it at my site. Okay. Anything else? So you personally and the whole nation will start to get tax documents beginning in January. The interest in doing tax returns will begin to a more fevered pitch about the middle of the month. And most of us start our actual operations at our sites the last couple days of January, or certainly by the first week of February. Particularly those people who earned tax credits, child tax credit, or earned income credit, want to file early. As soon as they file, they can get the money. They don't get the money until they file. People who know that they're always going to have to pay because they've got a business without any withholding, or a lot of stock sales without any withholding, tend to file later in the season. What's the hurry? I'm not going to pay it until April anyway. So, but yeah, we get a lot of people even early on, those first couple of weeks, and some of those return amounts are going to be, they are quite large. Earned income credit and child tax credit are the drivers. As we'll get referenced in Part B in the next training, but the refunds that people get this year, 2022, may be lower than they got last year. Some of the credits have been reduced. I won't get into that now. That's part of next week's training. Okay. All right. All of you who have participated, we loved having you. We hope that you benefited from this. We hope that you are registered in Link Learn. We hope you are registered in TaxSlayer. We hope that you have written down your user IDs and passwords. Those are very important for you to maintain. I maintain a little book of all of my key information, and that's where mine are buried. Every year I update it when I need to. Okay. Good luck. Reach out to us if you've got questions. You'll see a recording of this later this week. You'll see the slides later next week. Go through it again, take your test, and sign up for Part B either next week or in January. Doesn't matter which one you do. Thank you. You are dismissed.